who is a digital product and UX design leader who has integrated machine learning solutions into expert systems in the retail industry. Stuart has a passion for digital accessibility and has also produced many hours of accessible online videos for Boston's GBH public television station and programmed a live captioning component, CART, for online meeting software working with the National Center for Accessible Media. Welcome. And then we also have Olivier Vroom, who has a background in AI design research and is pursuing a Master of Science in Artificial Intelligence. In addition to his research background, Olivier has founded several B2C SaaS companies and userexperience.org. Olivier has also worked as a product owner and UX designer for KLM, where he focused on creating accessible, intuitive, and user-centered experiences, gaining valuable insights that now inform his approach to designing AI-powered systems. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, welcome this morning. Thanks for coming to our session today. We're here to talk about accessibility and AI. I'm Stu Smith.
And I'm Olivier Vroom.
Today, there are over 1.3 billion people in the world that suffer from significant disabilities.
And in the US, that translates to one in four people. So it's a lot. Sorry for the noise.
So 9 out of 10 people don't have access to the assistive technology that they need. Let that sink in for a second. Out of 1.3 billion people, 90% of them don't have access to the assistive tech they need. So what we're going to cover today is a quick accessibility overview.
We're also going to be talking about an overview of AI. And can you guys hear us okay, by the way? Yeah? Okay, great.
We'll cover some regulations and guidelines.
Then we'll be looking at the current state of assistive tech.
We'll talk about our learning journey and next steps.
And then we'll be wrapping it up with a Q&A and discussion.
But if there are questions as we go along, please feel free to let us know, raise your hand, and we'll pause for questions as we go as well. So you already got the intros about us. I am a senior manager of UI UX at UKG. I used to work at Nike and GBH, as you heard. I also worked for myself for 15 years full time. And my all-time favorite project was the National Constitution Center. It's a museum in Philadelphia that was funded by an act of Congress, and it was my first exposure to a large-scale ADA-compliant project where all the touchscreens and media had to be ADA-compliant.
Yeah, and as mentioned, I'm the founder of userexperience.org, where I post articles and I interview people. I have a podcast as well, so if you guys want to get interviewed, let me know. And yeah, I just try to share tips and tricks about how to design things. I'm also doing a master's degree right now in artificial intelligence. I used to work at KLM, as mentioned, as a user experience designer. And then when ChatGPT came out, I locked myself up in my room for 3 days and then decided to quit my job and start studying AI. So yeah, I'm really passionate about AI, but I think it's something we should really think about, and it can be dangerous if we don't design it well.
All right, so let's start with a general overview of accessibility. And first, let's define what is digital accessibility. It's designing digital products that are usable by everyone. It's not just putting out your product available to everyone, but who can actually use it and take advantage of the features. Everyone includes people who are blind or have low vision and use screen readers, people who are deaf and hard of hearing that rely on captions or transcripts, people that have limited mobility that use keyboard navigation or voice control, as well as people with cognitive or neurological differences that need simplified layouts, clearer instructions, or a different mode of instruction altogether. So just to back up a step, let's talk about the difference between equality and equity. Equality is when you give the same resources to everybody, no matter what their need is. If you picture people trying to look over a fence, someone who's tall can look right over, and someone who's not as tall can't. But if you give both people a box to stand on, the person who's tall doesn't need it, and the person who's not as tall may still not be tall enough. So equity is about giving each person what they need to succeed based on their unique circumstances. The WHO, World Health Organization, first defined disability in 1980, and it's changed a lot over the years. In 1980, disability was framed as a personal attribute, or the medical model, where something was wrong with the person that needed to be fixed. Now we think of disability more as context dependent. So it's not the problem with the person that needs to be fixed, but it's a mismatch between the person and their environment and how they can interact with it. So we're all headed for disability in some way or another. We're all impacted and excluded in different ways depending on the situation. You can think of disability as a spectrum. So there are permanent disabilities, like the loss of a limb. There are temporary disabilities, like a broken arm and a cast. And there's situational disabilities, like you're holding a baby or your hands are full of groceries or something, where you can't, interact with the elevator buttons or open the door properly. So designing for someone with a permanent disability can benefit everyone. Because if you solve for that use case, people with temporary or situational disabilities also benefit. And just to put some numbers to this kind of thinking, if we look at the United States, there's about 26,000 people a year that suffer loss of upper extremities, like the loss of an arm. But if we include the people with temporary and situational impairments, the number's over 20 million people. So by solving for those 26,000, we can impact over 20 million. We did focus our project on deaf and hard of hearing, and here's some of the stats. So there's about 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 children in the United States are born with severe hearing loss in one or both ears. More than 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents, which causes huge communication problems if parents aren't willing to learn ASL or learn how to communicate with their child. And among adults from 20 to 69, age is the strongest predictor of hearing loss. The older you are, the more likely you are to have hearing loss, and the worse it's likely to be. Like I said, we're all headed there. So men are almost twice as likely as women to have hearing loss, and non-Hispanic white adults are more likely than any other racial ethnic group to have hearing loss, while non-Hispanic black adults have the lowest incidence.
Yeah, so Stu just mentioned a bunch of facts, like sometimes a little scary facts, and the idea is that we decided to focus on today is, everyone's talking about AI nowadays. It's an up-and-coming technology, and we were thinking, okay, how can we actually design and use AI to improve accessibility for the deaf community? Before I dive into that, I'm going to be giving a quick overview of what AI is, just so we're a little bit on the same page. So yeah, if you think about AI nowadays, the first thing that might come to mind is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is definitely a form of AI, but if we go on to the next slide, we'll see that AI actually has a very a longer history than just ChatGPT. So back in 1955 is when the term artificial intelligence was actually coined. And then, for example, there's been a bunch of different milestones since then. If we look at 1967, some of you might remember the Eliza chatbot. Has anyone actually here used the Eliza chatbot before? Yeah, okay, we have one in the front. That was like the LLM and ChatGPT back in the day. And what people noticed is that even though it was quite simple, like technically speaking, the way that people interacted with it was quite surprising. So people ended up opening more to it and actually confiding in it. And that's a theme that is important. It's like the way you design something, changes how people interact with it, obviously. In 2016, for example, AlphaGo beat the world champion Lee Sedol in the game of Go. People thought that might never happen, and it ended up happening. And only in 2022, which, believe it or not, is like only 3 years ago, is when ChatGPT was released. And there's been a bunch of other milestones since then, which we'll see shortly. But yeah, one of the things that's important to take into consideration is that there is actually a technology underlying AI, and it's not just one umbrella term. It's not like AI. There's like a bunch of different things. So Gen AI, reinforcement learning, these are a bunch of like keywords. Machine learning, deep learning, et cetera, et cetera. And the point I'm trying to get across here is that it's important to understand that there is like a difference in the technology, and that it's important to, if you're designing technology, to also understand what the technical aspects are. You don't want to like overpromise, and you want to make sure you understand what are the limitations, what are the risks as well. So if we just dive a little bit into LLMs, large language models, I'll just give a brief explanation of them. I'm sure you guys have seen something similar before, but if we take a look here, if we give an input, like the capital of France is, and we look at the LLM, it will actually try to output a prediction of what the next word is. For example, in this case, Paris. So a lot of people, when they see this or understand this, they're like, oh, well, it's just like an autocorrect, like what's the big deal? Like, you know, it's not gonna be able to do anything. But a lot of people have actually pushed back on that notion and said that by being able to generate these things or by being trained to do so, it's actually created an internal model of the world, which is something that, you know, can be scary, but also very powerful, and there's a lot of opportunity in there. Any questions so far, by the way? Okay, so this is another cool graph that I found. If we take a look up here, we can see a black line, and that represents 100% human performance, which obviously is a little subjective. But the point we're trying to get across here is that there's like different types of tasks in different categories. And actually lately, you know, starting in 2012, AI has actually been getting closer and closer to human performance. So I don't know if you guys remember CAPTCHAs back in the day where you had to just click on like a picture of a stoplight or a bus. Well, nowadays it's getting harder and harder, and sometimes I like give up and like send a picture of it to ChatGPT and it'll solve it for me. So yeah, it's getting there. And you know, it's scary on the one hand, but there's also a lot of opportunities here. We just have to use it well and design it well as well.
And just to put it in perspective of where we are with ASL and automatic sign language recognition from a computer standpoint, it's an exciting time. In the past 2 years, the ASL data set size have increased by 10 times based on new technology and being able to send mobile devices out to people to record ASL. But there's still less than 2,000 hours total of ASL training data in these data sets. If you compare that to voice training data, it's millions of hours. And the comparison between where we are today and voice recognition is roughly equivalent to where voice recognition was in 1993, which was just starting to be useful and carry full conversations. All right, we're gonna pause again. We're gonna get into the exciting stuff here with regulations. Any questions before we jump into it? All right.
So yes, to set it up for me, we're going to be talking about regulation guidelines. So it's important to take into consideration what the regulations are, but also I want to make sure that we frame it in the right way. Like the reason we're talking about this is not so that, you know, we don't get fined or we're doing it legally. Like the point is to do it for the people, but it's, you know, these are good frameworks that we can use to think about how to design these systems. So I'm Dutch, so I'm from the European Union, or from Europe. And there, they recently released and adopted the EU AI Act. And basically what the EU AI Act is a framework of the different types of AI and the different risks they pose. And then based on the risks that they pose, like guidelines of how, you know, they should be used and how they shouldn't be used. And the European Disability Forum made a public statement about that, where they said, okay, it's a partial win for accessibility. So why is it a partial win for accessibility and not a full win? Well, on the one hand, they were happy that it recognized that AI systems should obviously not discriminate. But on the other hand, they didn't really give any concrete actions or guidelines on how to do that to prevent this. And lastly, they also overlooked national sign languages by only requiring official spoken EU languages. And then coming up in June of this year, actually, so really soon, the EU Accessibility Act, the EEA, will officially be adopted. And basically, in a nutshell, it's a mandate by the regulators that anyone that's creating like online experiences has to take accessibility into consideration. And if they don't, they might get fined. And this is like a really positive change. And it's also like giving a lot of opportunity for like people to help other companies design their systems to be more accessible. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Oliver. In the United States, we have the American with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act that are the foundational laws that protect the rights of people with disabilities in the United States. the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was only passed in 1990. I have a picture here on the right of a children's book called All the Way to the Top, and it's about a true story of a 9-year-old that joined a protest movement called the Capitol Crawl. It's a really great story. You should look it up. It's interesting. But they abandoned their wheelchairs at the bottom of the stairs and literally crawled up the Capitol stairs as a protest for accessibility, and was a big factor in getting the ADA passed. Section 508 is part of the Rehabilitation Act. It applies to governments and how they electronically work with contractors and citizens. Section 508 standards are harmonized with Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG standards, for 2.0 level AA. So these are the right standards to be using, and if you're working on an AI system, the rules don't change. Everything here still applies. The US currently does not have a single comprehensive federal AI law, but things are moving quickly. So keep your eye out for more on that. So what can we do? What frameworks are there that we can actually go by? So we have, from the Interpreting Safe AI Task Force, guidance on AI and interpreting services specifically. This is from the deaf community, put out by experts who are bringing like the deaf wisdom of ASL and how they experience the world to AI to inform not just regulations, but the development, and they need to be involved with development. The mission, again, is to establish industry-wide guidelines for design and adoption of AI interpreting.
Yeah, and in this guideline and framework, they first start off by describing the different degrees of AI involvement in a system. So starting out with the first one, which is actually zero involvement, is just purely human generated. So in this case, picture just a person speaking, and then an interpreter, and then a deaf person. Then there's human generated with AI, so that would be that they're using tools to help with the translation. Then there's no human involved, but just overseeing it real time. And then at the end, there's one human review, which is basically after the translations actually happened, just someone that checks in and double checks everything went well. And lastly, it's AI generated interpreting, so there's no human input here. And the idea here is that it's important to consider what the relationship is between the people and the AI, and think about that it's a spectrum, and that people should always be able to revert back to human involvement if possible and if necessary. So basically, human in the loop.
They also laid out several ethical principles that we're going to talk about in the next few slides. But they're end user autonomy,
evidence of improving well-being for end users,
the transparency of AI quality for the general public,
and then lastly, accountability by companies for harm.
Do you want to take this one?
So the first one, as Stu mentioned, is end user autonomy. So that's what I already alluded to before. Also users should be included in the design process, because if you're designing something for a community, they should also be able to give their input. There should also be informed consent to accept or decline the use of AI. And then, as I mentioned previously, with the spectrum of degrees of human involvement, there should be the ability to shift back to more human involvement at any point.
Yeah, it's about empowering the person. And the second principle is, are we really improving the well-being of end users? Are we actually making people's lives better with this technology? Or are we creating programs and products just for technology's sake, because it's cool and we can? There are lots of regulations right now that apply to human interpreters, that they have to meet certification standards. There are special high-risk situations, like if you're at the doctor's office or legal proceedings, dealing with police, contracts, buying and selling real estate. All these require specialized knowledge of the material as well as ASL general. So AI has to meet these standards or exceed them. And we also need to address the possibility of unintended consequences. Right now, there's a huge shortage of qualified interpreters, and so AI is kind of filling the gaps. But if we rely too much on AI, we're going to have problems where we're not getting enough human interpreters where we really need them. But in some cases, lower risk situations, it's okay to use AI more where the accuracy isn't as critical. But always looking at those unintended consequences. I'll share a quick quote from IBM back in the 70s. They said, machines should never be allowed to make business decisions because it can't be held accountable. And yet today we have machines making business decisions all over the place throughout our lives. So it's something we need to be thinking about and discussing.
Yeah, and the third point they mentioned is the transparency of AI quality. So it should be clear what the objective function is of the AI. So just like I mentioned before, that it's important to know what the technical, how it actually works. It's also important to know what it's training for. So for example, in the case of LLMs, it's been trained to predict the next word. So yeah, that's important to know. It should also be clear what the performance metrics are so that people can review them. There should also be information about bias. So for example, as Stu mentioned, there's a lot more data out there for spoken language versus ASL language, but there's also dialects and there might be biases in the data, so that's important to know. And lastly, there should obviously be regular reviews of the quality of the systems.
And finally, the fourth principle is accountability by companies for harm. There needs to be a clear chain of accountability across the organization that releases these products, and there should be clear limitations on the use. When you should use the AI, what it's good at, what it's not good at, and people really need to understand and have a literacy about the tools. Any questions before we go on? We've got one in the back. Oh, okay. We'll get you next.
Hi. Oh God. I am curious to know a little bit more about the accountability by companies for harm. I totally agree. I think what I'm starting to see, and I'm curious to get your input on, is these models, as I understand them, require lots of input. And so I think what I'm seeing is that folks are getting scared to begin to implement anywhere because they're like, it's not very good yet, but it's not going to get very good until it's used and they're told it's bad and this is how we make it better. So I was just curious to know your input on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'll just quickly summarize your question. So basically you asked, right now the systems might not be up to par, performing very well, but in order to get there, they need data. In order to get data, people need to use them. So it's kind of like a catch-22 chicken or egg thing. And I think, in my opinion, the important thing here is adoption and how you approach a community to start using it. So if you shove something down people's throats and be like, here, this is technology, start using it, people might react defensively. But if you approach them in the right way and hey guys, this is to help you out and let's think about this together, let's include you in the design process. I think at that point the understanding is oh, actually we're being listened to and what we say matters. So I think that's the right way to approach it. Basically nothing about us without nothing about us without us. Does that answer your question? Do you have any other?
Yeah, I think I would just add that on the harm, we don't have the laws in place right now to really hold companies accountable, and so it's something we need to be advocating for as responsible designers. That's all I have. Yeah. And, we had another question down here.
Hi, so I have a question in regards to agentic AI and accessibility. So I was just wondering, obviously besides the underlying data here, but how is accessibility being defined in these type of systems such as agentic AI moving forward outside of ChatGPT or the underlying data? Is there any research in regards to that?
Yeah, great question. So I'll take a shot at it. So agentic AI has a ton of possibilities to get people what they need, individualized. So whether it is a new type of browser that automatically takes your accessibility into account. That kind of stuff is still evolving. So the APIs and frameworks for those to support the agentic system are coming online now, and I think it's a big area of growth. Right, and we have one more?
Yeah, I can hold it to the end if you need to get going.
How are we on time?
We have 15 minutes.
We got 15 total.
Yeah, let's hold it.
Yeah, I can hold it. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you want to talk about current state of assistive tech?
Yeah, so let's take a look at what's happening nowadays. So as you can see here, this is called VRI, so video remote interpreting. So in the case here, we have a deaf person, and then we have a medical personnel, and then actually a translator. So this is like, I mean, in my opinion, it's like low tech. It's like almost like a Skype thing, but it's actually, you know, really useful and helpful, and has improved accessibility for a while now. Also, something cool to mention is the Federal Communications Commission, and they'll actually pay and fund people so that they can get access to translators, so that they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, in the course of our research for this, we actually got to use VRI a little bit, and the FCC makes it free. So you can go to a provider of VRI services and sign up for free, and the FCC covers it because it's part of the Americans with Disabilities rights that people have.
Yeah. And then looking at more of the cutting edge technology. So we have a bunch of different ones. I mean, nowadays you guys have probably seen that speech to text is getting pretty good, and text to speech as well. And there's some companies that have specialized on helping the deaf community. So if we take a look here, for example, we have Slate.ai, and here's an image of someone doing sign language, and then here is the translated text. So that's nice to see. And then also here, for example, there is, you just like click record, and then people will be talking, and then it'll actually caption this live, and then in colors, like with the names of different people. So yeah, the technology is getting there. I mean, there's like 150,000 users for this one, for example. So it's not being widely adopted yet, and there's still a lot of things that we have to learn. And like someone mentioned before, like the performance might not always be up to par. But you know, the industry is going there, and we just have to make sure again that we think about how we design these systems.
Yeah, here's just another example of one. This was released in Japan. This is a full computer graphic generated avatar that can allegedly speak Japanese Sign Language, American Sign Language, as well as International Sign Language. But again, these systems on interpreting someone's ASL or sign language on the fly, this is the other side of the coin where you're creating an avatar to sign for people. And there's a lot of challenges that go into that.
Yeah, just to build a little bit on what you were talking about. So we actually talked to, I think it was a deaf advocate,
Mm-hmm.
and what she mentioned is, and she was also a translator or an interpreter, and she mentioned that like 90% of the communication is not through the hands, but actually through the facial expressions and through all these other like, well, non-verbal, but like body language and very like subtle things that maybe an AI system might not pick up on. And also there's the whole human relationship aspect to it. So when there's a communication between, for example, a deaf person and then a non-deaf person and an interpreter, the interpreter is actually also, in a sense, part of the conversation. So yeah, just important to keep in mind that we shouldn't just like blindly follow technology and like, you know, just start using AI all the way. Yeah.
So nothing about us without us is a famous slogan. It's been around a long time. It's been used a lot with the disability movement in America. And so how are we getting after this? Oliver and I are not deaf, so we had a lot to learn. We had some connections in the community, and we started reaching out to people. One of the first people or groups we talked to was Partners Interpreting. They're a professional American Sign Language interpretation company, and through them we were able to learn a lot. I think we naively came up with the idea for a survey that we thought we could just throw out there and have some results to share with you today. Spoiler, that didn't work out. But what we realized in talking with the interpretation company was if we wanted to really reach out and get deaf people to respond to us, we really need to be more deaf-centric. And so we did come up with a survey, and it's being translated right now into American Sign Language. And we're going to be promoting it over the next few weeks. It's Global Accessibility Awareness Day, May 15th. So more about the survey to come. But yeah, we talked to PhDs, we talked to deaf-blind people who are also generous with their time and information. The Registry for Interpreters of the Deaf, we were able to meet with the CEO, and she connected us with Professor Brown, who was part of the Safe AI task force. So we've really come a long way, but we're still at the beginning of our journey. You have anything to add on that?
No, looks good.
All right.
Sounds good.
So what are the next steps? Well, we have a survey, almost. The goal is to amplify deaf and hard of hearing perspectives, especially when it comes to AI. And what we have now, live, is a wait list that you can sign up for to take the survey. Like I said, the translation should be done today, and we're hoping to launch it next week and in time for Global Accessibility Day.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like, why would we want you guys to fill this in? You know, as UX designers, we also want to get your inputs and your thoughts and maybe your questions that you guys have. So what we're essentially trying to do with this survey is like get the inputs from the deaf community and get the inputs of the design community and kind of connect those two communities in a sense.
Yeah, well, some of the things we heard was people aren't reaching out to us. And, you know, if we can create more connections, and it's really, people are out there. We just need to include them. So we do have a little QR code. Feel free to scan. It is just a wait list right now, but we will email you as soon as the survey is ready. And just so you know, is my mouse on that screen? Okay, never mind. Okay, it is.
You want to show the...
I was going to show the survey. It's a little sketchy. It's very plain, but it's safe. Yeah, so here is a sample of the translation and the introduction to the survey. So how do I play this thing? Yeah, there you go. So obviously there's no audio on the video, so I'll just go ahead and read what the translation is. So welcome, your experience matters. The survey seeks to understand the feelings, experiences, and concerns of the deaf and hard of hearing community, including American Sign Language interpreters, accessibility professionals, and advocates regarding artificial intelligence and machine learning, powered accessibility tools for the deaf and hard of hearing individuals. AI and ML tech professionals, digital product managers, product designers, and user experience researchers are also invited to participate, which is all of you. Click the button below to take the survey now. All right. It's a cool sign for click the button, but I'm going to just move on. So just to recap, gotta get my mouse back. We talked about accessibility. We talked about artificial intelligence. We covered rules and regulations and what the current state is. We talked about our outreach efforts and where we're going with them. And if there are more questions, let's open up for discussion. I think we had one question down here. Yeah.
Thank you both. One question I have is, without one law in the United States regarding accessibility, how have you advocated for accessible experiences? Have you ever had challenges getting buy-in, and how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah. So yes, it's tough to get accessibility in sometimes, especially if it's not considered from the start. The argument to make is that it really is a foundational piece of software development. It's not an add-on, it's not optional. Like we covered those laws, the ADA, you can get sued under, the European law you can get sued under. It's real problems for people and it's real consequences. So I make that argument, and it's a lot of just education. So educating your engineering partners, your product partners, and getting that alignment and buy-in. Yeah. Another one in the back?
Hi again. I was curious to know if this survey is intended for American audiences, or if this is sort of geographically agnostic, because I would be so fascinated to know how folks perceive the digital world when their primary sense is their eyes, and the design decisions that they would prefer to see, which I know has geographic variances.
Yeah, great question. So we are focused on American Sign Language. So it's generally the United States and Canada. North America is the biggest number of ASL users. We did look into making it more global, but the scope is really big. There's a lot of different sign languages. There's not a lot of standards between different languages, and there's different dialects, and there's a lot to it. So we left room for that with some open-ended questions in the survey, but it's primarily focused on the United States, North America. All right. Any other questions? We've got a few minutes left. Everybody need more coffee? All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll get the slides up to y'all, and we'll get some links for learn more.